Honorable Shri Arvind Kejriwal, Chief Minister, Government of the NCT of Delhi, the Honorable Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, Shri Justice Satish Chandra Sharma, and also the Chancellor of NLU Delhi, Professor Sri Krishna Deva Rao, Vice Chancellor of NLU Delhi, esteemed guests, distinguished faculty members, graduating students, their families, parents, and friends, and above all for me, my own very distinguished guru who is a part of the audience, Professor Upendra Bakshi. I express my gratitude to NLU Delhi for inviting me to speak at today's convocation. I was awestruck by the fact that out of 18 of the gold medals, out of the 22 gold medals which have been listed on the first page of the sheet which was given to us, 9 have been bagged by Isha Goel. And then, of course, if you put together all the gold medals which have been bagged by the female students, is just an indicator of the times that we live in and the times that are going to come. But I was also struck by the fact that almost all the gold medals have been instituted by Shri so-and-so in. And that's an indicator of the times which were of a male-dominated, hugely patriarchal profession and society that we live in. I'm sure that by the time, several convocations later, we'll have the likes of Isha and Tansi and Nidhi instituting medals in honor of those who have mentored them through their lives. So I do believe we have crossed the first bridge of opening up access to education. And it's not just a sign. When I was much younger, people would say that, well, the girls are much more sincere than the boys. And I think there's more to it than that. I think this aspiration for mobility, the aspiration to combat the challenges which women in our society face, is reflected in a very large measure of the tremendous success which young women are achieving. And I think it's now time for us to introspect and reflect on how we create conditions where this potential which they express in terms of the medals which they have today translates into real-time changes in our society. And I think that's going to be the great challenge of our times, of converting this potential into a transformation in Indian society. I begin by congratulating all the graduates of the batch of 2022 as well as their parents and well-wishers. As you draw the curtains on your journey of half a decade through law school today, I want you to take a moment to look around you and grasp it all in. You will see your teachers, your friends, and your fellow batchmates. Through you, and this I say on every convocation, never tire of saying that, through you, I reach out to my own teachers who have mentored me, to teachers who have taught us the basics of liberal values, of constitutional values, teachers who have taught us our first baby steps in feminist jurisprudence, which was then left to us to develop as life took us through the learning experiences. These relationships which you have fostered in law school are your greatest takeaway from these 5 years of law school. You're bound by the shared experience of a time that will not come back again. Your batchmates will be your friends for the rest of your lives. These relationships that you have built in law school will remain a solid foundation for your upcoming professional life. When I was taking my first baby steps as a lawyer in the Bombay High Court, some of the best briefs that I got were from my own students, who I would teach every evening, teaching comparative constitutional law for the LLM students at the University of Mumbai. So our profession is all about relationships, about peer relationships. Convocations are a bittersweet feeling. As you collectively stand at the threshold of what we all on the outside call the real world, you will be filled with anticipation and maybe a little dread about what the future holds for you. And I personally feel that some amount of anticipation is necessary in life. I still anticipate every night before court, and to quote Corin Cooper, when that edge of anticipation is gone, I suppose I'll know that it's time to retire. So in the fond anticipation that I launch on every night before the next day, I do believe that there is still time until the Constitution bids me farewell. Graduating from one of the country's premier law schools, you will have to strike an uneasy balance between the ambitions you have for yourself and what the real world expects of you. In your quest to achieve this balance, don't let yourself be defined by such ambitions or expectations. Because very often ambitions are foisted on you as are expectations. They are not self-generated. Lawyers are trained to divorce evidence from ideology, reason from rhetoric, and principles from party lines. This was said in the Harvard commencement of 2019 by Dean John F. Manning. Your journey as a professional should only be defined by the good that you are willing to do in this world. In today's world, which needs lawyers more than ever, this ability is no less than a superpower. And in the words of Sam of the Lord of the Rings, there is some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. My purpose today is to guide you in navigating the questions that many of you might be asking yourselves as graduates, with loads of ambitions and expectations on your shoulders. My physiotherapist just told me this morning that unless I do some shoulder exercises, I might get into a frozen shoulder. I don't know whether that's the product of the loads of expectations which build over the years and which you know that you have to still fulfill. During your academic studies, you would have encountered the law through the black letters of your books and case materials. However, when you enter the legal profession, you realize that law throbs with human interest. For law's concern is the quotidian affairs of people. Laws breathe life in our minds and expect us to behave in a civilized manner with respect to everyone, be it humans or animals or the environment. Law in that sense is a communal enterprise based on order and procedure. It binds us together in mutual interest, mutual welfare, and mutual happiness. However, laws can only do so much until all of us are willing to participate in its endeavor. A law is not an antidote to prevailing social values. Rather, it is a means to forge a new future based on the ideals enshrined in our Constitution. As we know, the law can be an instrument of good, and as we know in colonial times, the law can also be an instrument of evil. The distinction between good and the evil that a law can produce lies in those who wield the law, and those who handle the law, those who interpret the law, and those who engage with the law. And therefore you must realize that the abstract notion of law gives way to real-world consequences based on how we exercise that great authority as citizens in our day-to-day lives, in our engagement with the law. Law in itself cannot solve the myriad human problems. Law is merely a set of facilitative tools to render justice. The general notion that is often ascribed to my role as a judge of the Supreme Court is that I deliver justice. However, delivering justice is not the preserve which is reserved only for judges in our country. As students of law, all of you are also capable of rendering justice in your own small but significant way. For all the young graduates here, it is incumbent upon you to endeavor to leave the law a little better than you found it to be. The theoretical underpinning of my suggestion is grounded in the fundamental idea of justice, which is essentially the constant and perpetual purpose of rendering each person their due in light of social circumstances. We live in a society governed by the rule of law. Rule of law, if understood and implemented properly, is a defense against oppressive structures such as patriarchy, casteism, and ableism. It is an aspirational goal which is beyond you and me as individuals, but towards which all of us have our parts to play. However, we must understand that rule of law does not depend merely on the constitution or on legislation. It largely depends on the political culture and the habits of citizens, especially young legal professionals like you. In a sense, all of you are the guardians of our constitutional and democratic traditions. To you is entrusted the task of ensuring that the rule of law remains just that, the rule of law, and that it does not get substituted by rule by the law. Now, I know some of you will branch out to be corporate lawyers, some will litigate, some will take up academia, and still there will be some who might branch out of law altogether. Many of us chance upon the law as we chance upon engineering or medicine, or I dare say even politics. So many of us chance upon the law. You're told that this is the best career for you as a 15 or 16-year-old student, and then you join that area only to realize a few years later that maybe that was not meant for you. Don't be worried about your fears or your desire for change in your life. Whatever the trajectory of your career arc may be, embrace the change that comes your way and never feel the need to be locked into a particular path just because you started out with it. But irrespective of whether you are into litigation, law firms, or any other discourse, the real challenge that you will face on a daily basis is the duty to make choices that will not necessarily be one between right and wrong. The most difficult choices which you make, as I know as a judge, are not choices between right and wrong, but choices between right and choices between wrong and wrong. It is possible for right and power to be at odds with one another. Power that commands its legitimacy of being right because it is in accordance with law. Under those circumstances, it is no more a moral choice, but an ethical choice to make. I exhort you to make such choices, keeping in mind whether it promotes the goals of justice in that particular sphere. Increasingly, we are becoming individualistic. And by being individualistic, we focus on ourselves. It's good to introspect. It's good to reflect. But it is important to look beyond our own self-centered vision of our own existence and to look to others beyond us. You must strive to make the legal profession more inclusive and accessible when you become a part of it. This is one way to further the goals of justice. Last year, for 5 slots which I had for judicial clerkship in my chambers, I had 650 applicants unconnected with the law. First-time lawyers. Some of my judicial clerks have been first-time educated members of their families. So there is this huge talent in the country which is beckoning for democratizing of the legal profession, for breaking down the feudal structures of the legal profession, for providing access to the unconnected to the legal profession. If you are working in a corporate law firm, you must strive for a milieu that reasonably accommodates every individual, irrespective of individual differences. If you are a practicing lawyer, you have a professional responsibility to work for expanding access to justice beyond those who have financial or social advantages. If you aspire to join the judiciary, it is necessary that you place substantive justice as the foremost goal of adjudication. There is sufficient creativity in the law so as to accommodate the principles of substantive justice to the black letter of the law. As a policy maker, you can devise policies to socially and politically empower the marginalized. I know that the legal field, especially litigation, can be daunting for many who do not belong to the established cliques. And there are many such cliques. It is also the unfortunate reality of our legal profession that many aspiring and deserving professionals stay away from litigation because of the low pay that the profession offers. During my days as a law student at the Campus Law Center of Delhi University, one of my friends asked me about my plans after passing out from law school. I replied that I was going to practice law. When my friend heard this, he unsarcastically suggested that I should use my connections to get a gas agency or a petroleum outlet, because that was the only way I was going to make money as a lawyer. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through that to earn a decent income, even if I had a 180 square foot office in the heart of Fountain, Mumbai. But that situation, which was true of India in the 1980s, is no longer true today. When I came back from Harvard Law School and appeared in my first matter, I was given a docket for mentioning before Justice Sujata Manohar. In Mumbai, the fees are marked in GMs, gold mohars. There are no gold mohars which are put into your pocket anymore. In Mumbai, each gold mohar used to be 15 rupees. In Calcutta being superior, was 16 rupees. So I asked my briefing solicitor, how much do I mark for this docket? So he said, it's your first docket from me, so please mark something. I'll pay you whatever you want. And I was very unsure, because I was just learning my baby steps in the legal profession. I said, please tell me, what are the fees? What do I mark for mentioning this matter? So he says, normally a junior marks 3 guineas. Since you have just come back with a PhD degree, I'll allow you an allowance of 5. So instead of getting 45 rupees for mentioning, I was given 75 rupees for mentioning. But today the situation has changed. Today, young graduates like you have many other avenues to make your mark. May it be the corporate legal sector, legal sector policy think tanks, social activism, or even journalism. I mention social activism because even public interest litigation is quite a business sometimes in our courts. As part of the legal profession, there may arise occasions when you will harbor self-doubt. You will question your choices and curse your fate for choosing law as a career instead of engineering or medicine. You might also feel envious when you see your friends from other professional backgrounds enjoying a more lavish lifestyle than yours, while you sit in your office glued to your laptops doing due diligence or drafting plaints in suits. You will often meet people who will constantly judge you on your failures and your successes. One of the problems of our profession is that we are very judgmental of the lives of others. And one of the great learning experiences of spending 22 years on the bench is to learn not to be judgmental about others. You sit in judgment over others, but it's very different from being judgmental about others. And you cease to be judgmental about others when you allow them that space to think as they wish, to believe as they wish, and to express as they wish. It is always up to you to hold the candle in your steady hands that would light the world. I have my times of self-doubt. I would be telling you a half-truth if I told you that I don't have times of self-doubt. But then, when I have self-doubt, I'm reminded of Theodore Roosevelt's uplifting words when he said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." So don't be intimidated by your failures or cowed down by defeats. The unfortunate part of litigation is one party has to succeed and one party has to lose. Every time that we decide a case, I always look up for a split second at the lawyers. And except in some very seasoned cases, you look at that little face of disappointment on the part of the lawyer who has lost, and a sense of elation on the part of the lawyer who has won. And so also if the clients are in the court. But this feeling of defeat and success, of victory and failure, is part and parcel of being a legal professional. Every day is an opportunity to learn and develop. I'm aware that sometimes the legal fraternity may seem unwelcoming and formalistic, especially to those who do not have any prior legal background. Women lawyers may especially find it challenging to work in a male-dominated profession, which more often than not fails to accommodate their concerns and opinions. But times are changing. One of the great impacts of technology through the pandemic, and I do believe that even grim times like the pandemic have brought new learnings and new blessings and new ideas and new visions for our society. One of the great learnings of the pandemic is that when we went virtual in our court hearings, the number of women lawyers who were appearing in the court dramatically increased, because these young women lawyers who were performing manifold tasks, who were combining a multitude of obligations, as professionals, as mothers, as friends, as spouses, as employees, they were able to spend their time productively and address the court instead of being daunted by the sea of men around them in the court, wondering who is arguing this particular case. So technology has been a great enabler in liberating young women today in their access to the legal profession. I would particularly like to mention the story of a girl who was born in a small town in Kerala. The eldest of 8 siblings, her father, a government servant, motivated her to pursue the law. When she enrolled to study law at the Government Law College, Thiruvananthapuram, Trivandrum as it then was called, she was one of 5 girl students in her class. Being a Muslim woman, she was an outlier in many ways when she started practicing law in a male-dominated court profession. And mind you, this was in the year 1950. Later, she joined the judicial services and was appointed as a munsif in the Kerala Subordinate Judicial Services in 1958. By her sheer grit, determination and hard work, she rose through the ranks to become the first female judge to be appointed to the Supreme Court of India. I believe many of you might have guessed her name by now. Justice M. Fatima Bibi was a pioneer in her own right who opened a closed door for women in the judiciary. Yes, the legal profession might seem daunting and challenging, but the barriers are not high in front of your towering grit and dedication. My next advice to you is to think beyond the postulates of law. Law operates in pre-existing gender and societal codes, often contributing to the construction of gendered identities. As legal professionals, you should use deconstructive techniques to critique the existing legal philosophies and expose the ideological thinking that forms the substratum of the law. Never lead yourself into the trap that the law is bereft of ideology. Nothing is further from the truth. I would like to particularly advise you to incorporate feminist thinking in the way you deal with the law. When I was a junior judge at the Bombay High Court, I used to sit in the criminal roster with Justice Ranjana Desai, a very senior and distinguished colleague. During that time, we heard diverse criminal appeals. Initially, I viewed the matters where women were often subjected to the worst of crimes and violations from a very straight-jacketed perspective. But sitting with a colleague who had more diverse exposure to realities of gender gave me the necessary feminist perspective. Of course, I believe that all of us, including myself, have a lot to learn in terms of how we perceive law and apply social experiences. My vision in criminology as a young student was substantially altered when we attended the classes of Professor Latika Sarkar at the University Campus Law Center, when she taught criminology from a feminist perspective. The point which I want to emphasize here is that you must strive to engage with people from different backgrounds and experiences. Such conversations will expose you to diverse thoughts and social realities. In the process, it will make you more humane and kinder towards the others. One of the grave dangers of the age of information technology that we live in is that we all live, think, and work in information bubbles. Our attention spans are very short, and the result of our short attention spans is that we tend to identify with people who think like us, people whose views we agree with. Now that's the grave danger, just as so break that bubble, just as when we were young children and we blow those bubbles with soap on those little circular gadgets. You have to blow a little harder for the bubble to break. So if you blow a little harder in your life, you will find that the bubble will break and you will see the world outside in all its rainbow colors. Kindness is the foundation of justice. As Leo Tolstoy said, the kinder and more thoughtful a person is, the more kindness he or she can find in other people. Kindness helps us develop empathy. You will find that sense of compassion in you will track compassions in others, even in a convict who is on the death row. Empathy plays an important role in developing moral judgment and reasoning by sensitizing us to issues related to the principles of justice and fairness. It also enables us to appreciate the human meanings of a legal situation. Empathy allows us to find the hidden layers under the law and unearth its discriminatory impact on the lives of people, especially those most vulnerable and the marginalized in our society. In the judgment in Patil Jamal Wali versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, the Supreme Court used the theory of intersectionality to understand the violence and discrimination faced by a blind, scheduled caste woman. The court held that when the identity of a woman intersects with her caste, class, religion, disability, and sexual orientation, she may face violence and discrimination due to two or more grounds. So the experiences which a scheduled caste man faces are very distinct from the experiences which a person who belongs to the general segment of society, a male, faces. The experiences which a scheduled caste woman faces are very different from the experience which a scheduled caste man faces. And if that woman is also blind, if she is also disabled, then there is an intersection of these disabilities, of caste, of disability, of gender, and so on and so forth. In Neil Aurelio Nunes versus Union of India, the Supreme Court deconstructed the notion of merit to observe that scores in a competitive examination are not the sole determinant of excellence or capability. How well you do in CLAT or how well you do in an entrance test does not determine how responsible will you be when you fulfill roles in society. Rather, merit should be envisioned as a social good that advances equality. I mentioned the above two judgments because they challenge the conventionality of law in pursuit of substantive justice. The court viewed the plight of victims from an empathetic lens to uncover the social reality hidden beneath the layers of law. I would also like to point out that the judicial thought in the two judgments was largely generated by academicians and lawyers. In this light, my next advice to all of you is to nurture the habit of reading and expressing yourself through different media, such as the social media, blogs, newspapers, or academic journals. This will not only help you develop and structure legal argument, but also propagate novel ideas about the law. Now, one thing where most of you as young law graduates are better than most of us, the not so young senior advocates and judges, is your capacity to care. Yes, your capacity to care. The principle of caring entails that we must always consider others in our thoughts and actions. This obviously does not mean that we do not care for others in our daily lives, but the technicality and the dry nature of the profession makes us more methodical, more pedantic, whether we accept it or not. Just as surgeons sometimes get desensitized to pain within the sanitary confines of an operation theater, so also lawyers and judges run the risk of getting desensitized to pain, not in the sanitized confines, but in the isolated confines of courtrooms. You are comparatively untouched by the dryness of the law and have the empathy and care in you, which I sincerely hope you nurture and protect. Do make it a point every day to remind yourself that the sense of empathy and care which you have towards others as the young in our society does not evaporate when you combat the challenges of life. I know that the academic curriculums today may not allow you to have passions, hobbies, or interests apart from the law, but in the real world, you would be remiss if you were to be satisfied with being an expert in the law alone. At its heart, a law school imbibes within you the desire to learn. Use that ability to acquire knowledge much beyond the law in every field of human activity. That is my next piece of advice. Always take out time for yourself because the legal profession is unsparing at its worst. A good hobby will keep you motivated and energized for your day-to-day work. As I conclude then, my hope is that you refrain from perpetuating the traditional formalistic approaches to law. Instead, you should strive to adopt a legal approach that puts at its center the lives of people who struggle on a daily basis to make their ends meet and take care of their families. That is the true redemption of justice. I would like to conclude by referring to a poem by an Israeli poet, Yehuda Amichai. In the poem Tourists, Amichai addresses the experiences of people who have either been living in Jerusalem or visiting it as a tourist. In the poem, when a tourist guide points to a Roman arch in Jerusalem, Amichai writes, I said to myself, redemption will come only if their guide tells them. You see that arch from the Roman period, it's not important, but next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who's bought fruit and vegetables for his family. So when you look at all these beautiful monuments of the city, you must tell yourself, you see that arch from a period in our history, it's not that important, but next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a woman who's bought fruit and vegetables for her family. I would like to thank the Vice Chancellor for inviting me to speak on this momentous occasion. I wish all the graduating students all the best for their future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.